Hey everybody, in a previous video I showed you how to deploy Apigee X using the pay-as-you-go model. In that video we went through the provisioning wizard and we ended up with an installation that results in a single instance of the Apigee runtime. In today's video I want to expand on that and I want to show you how to add a second instance of the Apigee runtime in a different region. My name is Miguel Mendoza and I hope you're going to learn something today. So let's do a quick recap and look at what the architecture was for that setup. Again, we have this single instance of the Apigee runtime, and let me hop over to the diagram. So in this diagram, we have here on the left side the project that is associated with my Apigee organization, and on the right side we have these two projects which are managed by Google. And remember, there is the service networking project and there's the Apigee tenant project. Down here we have the actual runtime with the internal load balancer. Remember, this IP address here is the same as the IP address of the actual instance. And on the other side, on the project that you manage as a customer, we have the managed instance group as well as a global load balancer that was provisioned as part of the setup. So what exactly are we going to be doing today? Today we're going to be expanding here and adding another runtime instance, and we're also going to be creating another managed instance group that will be in front, or actually routing traffic to that new runtime instance. So let's go ahead and update the diagram so that the architecture reflects what it actually is going to look like once we're done. So first thing is we're going to expanding here the tenant project, and there's going to be another load balancer as well as another runtime instance. And this runtime instance, we're going to deploy it, let's say, in the west region. So I'm just going to rename this as US West 1 Kubernetes, and I'm going to update here in parentheses so that it shows this is going to be the US West 1 load balancer. I don't know the IP address yet, what it's going to be. We'll put that in. And let me update here. So this is the existing one. This is the US Central 1 load balancer. And all right, let me draw this arrow. All right, perfect. And now let's come up here on the other side. We're going to be creating another managed instance group. This one is going to be serving traffic for US West 1. And let me update this one. This is the existing one for US Central 1. And the load balancer also is going to be updated to distribute traffic between these two managed instance groups. Let me update also the IP addresses in here. I don't know yet what the IP addresses for each of the VMs in the instance group are going to be, so I'm going to leave them as question marks. And also I do not know, since I don't know what the IP address of this load balancer is, I'm going to leave this here as a question mark as well. There's also a few changes here on the service networking host. Because we're creating a new runtime instance, we're going to need a new pair of CIDRs. We're going to need a new /22 for the runtime and also a new /28 for the support CIDR. So let me make this box slightly bigger so we can fit in that information. So over here, we're going to have a new runtime CIDR that I do not know yet. We'll figure it out as we go. And we're also going to have a new support CIDR range. And on the service networking host project, there's also going to be a new subnet that will use the runtime CIDR. So I'm going to leave this empty. This is going to be the US Central, sorry, not the Central, the US West 1 subnet. And remember, once again, all this stuff here on the right side, you're not creating this. This is created during provisioning or when you're creating an instance by Apigee itself. All you're going to be doing is, creating the stuff here on the Google project. So you're going to, or I am going to be creating, in this case, a new runtime CIDR, a new support CIDR. Then I'm going to go and tell Apigee, hey Apigee, can you please spin up a new runtime instance using these two CIDRs on this specific region that I want you to create the instance on. And once that is complete, then I'm going to go and create a new managed instance group and point it to that runtime instance. So let's go ahead and actually do it. So for that, we'll need to go over to the Cloud Console, and in here we'll go to VPC network. And under VPC network, we choose the existing VPC that we have for Apigee. And within the VPC, we'll go to private service connection. And under here, under private service connection, you can see there's these two tabs. Let's take a look at this one first. So here, you can see this is the actual existing peering connection with the service networking VPC. And you can also see that there's already two ranges associated with this connection. We had the 22 and the 28. These are the actual ranges that you see in this diagram. So what do we need to do? We need to create two new ranges and update the peering connection so that the two new ranges are available on this peering connection. So let's create the two new ranges. For that, let's hop over to the other tab, and in here we'll click on Allocate IP range, and I'm going to name this one Apigee US West 1 runtime. And for the actual IP range, make sure to pick one that's not overlap with an existing allocated range or an existing subnet that you have in the same VPC. So let's create the runtime range, and also let's allocate the range for support. Same thing, here it's going to be a /28, and once again it should be something that does not overlap with an existing range or an existing subnet. Great, so the second range is being created and that is done. Now we can go back here to the connections and select the existing connection, and we'll check each of these two new ranges so that they get associated with the peering connection. Click OK and update. And I think this is it from the point of view of networking. So we should be good to go now to Apigee and actually create the runtime instance. Great, so it's done. So let's go over to the Apigee UI to create the instance. I'm already in the administration page for instances, so I can just click here and create a new instance. First, let's choose what region this is going to be on. This is going to be on US West 1. For the name, I'm just going to keep it the default US West 1 as well. It's a good name because that way when you just look at the name of the instance, you can tell which region it's on. For IP range allocation, I'm going to choose custom, and this is because I already know what ranges I want to use, so I'm just going to type them in here. If I were to choose automatic, what's going to happen is that the Apigee UI or the backend code is going to look for an available range and choose from what's available. And if there's nothing available, it will give you an error. So let's go back over here and grab the values for the ranges. So we have the runtime range. We'll put it in here. And let's grab the support range. All right, so we got both of them. Next is asking us for the disk encryption key. I already have an encryption key that I have created before in this region, so I'm going to choose this. If you don't have one, just go ahead and create it. The wizard will let you do that. And finally, let's choose what environments are going to be attached to this runtime instance. I only have one, so I'm just going to select that one. And that's all you need to do here. So we can just go ahead and click on create. Perfect. Now the instance is being created. This process can take some time. In my experience, it can go from 25 to maybe 35 minutes. It really depends on how much workload it's there behind the scenes in terms of how instances being provisioned. So we'll just wait here and come back once this is done. So it has been around 25 minutes and it looks like the instance creation has completed successfully. So technically we should be good to go now to create the new managed instance group as well as updating the load balancer. But before we do that, let's update the diagram with the new information. We have already the IP address of the load balancer associated with the runtime instance. So we can come here to the diagram and here the internal load balancer. Let's replace the question mark with the IP address, and also we have the two-sided ranges, so let's update that as well. So let me grab that from over here, the runtime cider. We'll put it in as well, and let's grab the support cider. Perfect. Oh, actually, let's update also the subnet right here, which is the subnet that's created for the runtime. Now, even though you didn't create this subnet explicitly, we know that this subnet is there because we can actually go on the peering connection. So over here on the Cloud Console, if we come to VPC network peering and look at the peering connection, we can see that there is a route imported on that region for that subnet, which means that we know that there is a subnet created here on the other side of the peering connection. Next, we're going to create the managed instance group for the US West region, which is going to be forwarding calls to this load balancer right here. And also we're going to update the global load balancer to split traffic, to distribute traffic between the two managed instance groups. So how can we create this new managed instance group? There's a couple of ways. One way is to look at the Apigee documentation, and there is instructions. There are actually command line instructions that use the gcloud CLI utility to create the managed instance group. But there is an easier way. Since we already have a managed instance group for US Central, there is already a template that got created initially by the wizard for this managed instance group. So we can create a similar template to this one and just update a few properties to make sure that it works for this region and for this load balancer. So that's what we're gonna do. Wait, actually, there's one more thing. Since the virtual machines in this group are going to be in a new region, it means we cannot use the subnet that we already have here because this is in the US Central 1 region. So we're going to be creating a new subnet for this purpose. So this, right now we have one that's in US Central 1. We're going to have a new one that's going to be on US West 1. And the IP address or the range of IP addresses, I'll pick it up once I create the subnet. So let's go over to the Cloud Console to create a new subnet. Let's go over to VPC networks. I'll choose the existing VPC. And you can see here, this is the existing subnet. We're going to create a new one with the same name, just in a different region and a different IP address range. So let's pick the region. This is going to be US West 1. And for the range, I'll just pick another range that's not already being used. And let's go ahead and create it. This should take maybe around a minute or so. So the subnet has been created. Now let's go over and take a look at the existing instance group that we have. So here's the existing instance group, which has 2 instances, and it's on the US Central 1 zone. And here's the template that is being used by this instance group. So remember, we're going to need to create a new template as well as a new instance group from that new template. Let's take a look at the existing template. Remember, this instance template was created originally by the provisioning wizard when I did the original installation. There's a couple of properties in this template that we will need to edit to make it work for the new region. The first thing is on the network interface, we'll need to adjust it so that it's attached to the new subnet. Even though it has the same name, it's critical that we choose the new subnet, which is in the new region. The next thing we have to change is in the custom metadata, this endpoint property. Right now it's pointing to the IP address of the load balancer or the internal load balancer that is in the US Central region. For the new one, we will need to point it to the IP address of the new load balancer that's in the US West 1 region. So let's create a similar template. First thing, let's change the name. This is going to be US West 1. Next, let's go to the network interface. And in there, we'll switch it so that it uses the subnet that is in the US West 1 region. That's all good. Finally, let's change the endpoint metadata so that it points to the correct IP address of the internal load balancer that is in the US West 1 region, which is this one right here. All right, so that should be all good. Let's go ahead and create the new template. Perfect, we have the new template. Next, let's take a look at the existing instance group, as the new one that we're going to be creating is going to be very similar to this one with a few things changed. Here, the new one is going to have a different template. It's going to be the US West 1 template that we just created. Location obviously is also going to be different. It's going to be US West 1, but auto scaling is going to have the same settings. And also the VM lifecycle, there's no health checks. And finally, down here, port name mapping, we're going to have a mapping for port 443. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a new instance group. So we'll click here and create a new instance group. The name is going to be Apigee proxy US West 1. Let's choose the zone. So it's going to be, or the region, which is going to be US West 1, and it's going to be multi-zone. The template is going to be a new template that we created. For auto scaling, we're going to have a minimum of 2, maximum of 6. The CPU utilization is going to be at 75%. That's when it decides to auto scale. Cooldown period is going to be 90 seconds. Basically, this is all the same settings that I had on the other instance group. I'm just replicating that in here. And finally, there's no health check, but we do have a port mapping. Port HTTPS is going to be 443. And I think that's all that we need. So let's go ahead and create the instance group. Now, this is going to take maybe a couple of minutes before the new instance group is fully up and ready. So we'll just wait here for a bit. So the new instance group has been created successfully. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. We can see we have the minimum of 2 VMs, and each one has IP addresses, which are in the US West 1A subnet. Now let's actually go ahead and update the diagram so that it's got the latest information. So we have one VM, and the other one, it's the same, just next one, which is .5. Oh, and here the each of these VMs, they are forwarding traffic to the internal load balancer on the US West 1 region. Cool, so this is all updated. Next step, we have to update the global load balancer to distribute traffic between these two managed instance groups. So let's head back to the Cloud Console, and in here we'll search for load balancer. And this is the load balancer that was created by the provisioning wizard when I initially installed Apigee X. We're going to edit this load balancer. You can see right now this load balancer has this backend service, which it's really just one instance group. What we want to do is we want to modify the existing backend service for this load balancer so that it has two instance groups and it's able to distribute the load between those two regions. So let's click on edit. We'll go to the backend configuration, find the existing backend, modify this, and let's add a new backend on the existing backend service, which is going to be the Apigee proxy US West 1 instance group. Click on done. Now we have the two instance groups as part of this backend service. So that's all good. Let's go ahead and update. Now we can update the load balancer itself, and this will take a minute or so. And once it's done, we should be able to test it. Alright, so the new instance group has been added to the load balancer. So how do we go about testing this? First, let's understand how this load balancing logic actually works when you have multiple regions. We have a single backend service with two instance groups in different regions. The load balancer is going to pick one of these regions for every single call that comes through. Usually it wants to send you to the region that's closest to where you are or where the client is. So if I am making a call from a region or from a state in the United States that's closer to the central region, the load balancer will route you to that region. Same thing for US West. Let's say if I'm making a call from California, right? The call is going to be routed to the West region. Now, if the region is already at capacity, it will go to the next closest region. And within the specific region, it will round robin the calls between those VMs in the MIG. So knowing this, one way we could do to test it is that we could modify the hello world proxy that gets installed out of the box when you provision Apigee to tell us what region the call arrived into. So let's go over and jump onto the Apigee UI and make those changes. So we'll go to develop API proxies and we'll edit this hello world proxy. So let's go to the develop tab, and in here there's already a policy for sending a response that just says hello world. Let's modify this to tell us what region was actually the one that served the response. And for that, there is a flow variable called system.region.name that we can use. Great. So let's go ahead and save this and redeploy it. This will take a couple of minutes to deploy, so let's just wait a bit. So the new proxy revision has been deployed. Let's go ahead and test it. So I'm going to open a new tab, and in here we're going to go to the address of the API proxy. And you can see here that it's saying hello world from US West 1. And it doesn't matter if I refresh it 1 or 10 times, it's going to keep saying this because I am making the call from a client. My laptop, it's located physically in California, which is closest to the US West 1 region. Now, what if I want to actually test this to make sure that there's traffic being routed as well to US Central 1. We can use a VPN to switch regions. So in my case, I can come here and select New York from my VPN. And now we can refresh this page and we can see that it's serving from a different region, in this case, US Central 1. So hopefully this shows you that everything is working as expected. The global load balancer is routing traffic to the correct backend or the correct managed instance group, and in turn the managed instance group is forwarding the traffic to the correct internal load balancer from Apigee in the correct region. Now, the responses that you see in here in this page on the Hello World proxy, these are in a sense hard-coded in the proxy, and there's no target backend that the proxy is reaching to. In a real-world scenario, you will have maybe on-premise services in different data centers, or maybe services in actual Google Cloud that are in different regions, and Apigee would need to reach to those services. To do that, you will have to add logic in the API proxies themselves to distribute the traffic based on whatever condition you decide, and there's different ways of doing that. I may show how to do this in a future video. For now, I hope that this content was useful, and if so, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.